Dawn did not arrive as a gentle friend. It crept like a pale secret through the trees, slipping between branches and shards of mist that clung to the ground. The clearing held a hush that was less peace than the pause between storms. Hunter lifted his head from the child and tasted the cold on the air, tasting also the thin metal scent of his own blood. His breath came slow. The ache in his ribs throbbed in time with the small breaths of the baby pressed to his chest. He rose carefully so the blanket did not fall away. The infant made a sound like a sigh and then settled, trusting without knowing why. Hunter lowered his muzzle and nudged the edge of the cloth tighter, tucking warmth where the wind tried to steal it. He stood a long moment, listening. The forest answered in the chatter of distant birds and the quiet clink of branches shedding frost. No footfalls, no padded step, no circling bodies. But his instincts refused to loosen. Water. The word was not a word to him, only a need that rose from somewhere deep where hunger and thirst spoke the same simple truth. He had to find a place where the infant's lips could be wetted, where his own dry mouth could become strength again. He tested his weight on the leg the wolf had raked and found it tender but usable. Then he bent, caught the blanket's corner gently between his teeth, and lifted. The bundle was light, yet heavy with meaning, heavier than any kill he had ever carried. Each step shifted the little weight against his jaws and asked him to balance strength with care. He moved through the low brush, nose raised to read the air. Beneath the scents of old leaves and damp bark, something clean glided past, faint but sure as a silver thread. He followed it, winding through saplings and over fallen limbs furred with pale fungus until the thread became sound. The stream's voice was small. The water slipped around stones and whispered over them, bright and cold and honest. Hunter lowered the blanket onto a pad of moss near the bank and nudged it tight again. The baby's eyes were sealed against the morning light, lashes clumped with sleep, mouth opening in soft fits as if searching. Hunter stepped to the edge and drank. The water cut through the grit in his throat and spread a steadiness down into him. He drank until his belly no longer clenched and then returned to the infant. He dipped his tongue and flicked a little water to the child's lip. The mouth worked, tasting, then seeking, and Hunter did it again, slow and careful, again and again. The child quieted. The tiny chest rose, fell, and rose again. Hunter let out a sound that was not quite a whine and not quite a breath. He lowered his head until his whiskers brushed the baby's cheek, and only when the rhythm stayed even did he turn his ears to the trees once more. Across the stream, low brush had been bent in a way that spoke of weight. Something had pushed through there in the night. Hunter held still, reading the trampled shapes, the slide of mud, the stale mark of musk that did not belong to deer or boar. Wolves had come and gone, skirting the edge of water, searching for the scent they had lost. He felt their absence like a hand pressing his back. Move, the pressure said. Move now. He gripped the blanket again and began to climb the bank where the ground held a scatter of the day's first light. The trees thinned, then leaned together, then thinned again. He found an old path none of the living now kept, a faint seam through grass and last season's leaf. The chitter of jays flicked high above. Somewhere far off, a dead branch fell with a crack that dragged across the space between heartbeat. He kept going until the stream's voice was a whisper behind him, and the little weight in his mouth had warmed his jaws. The scent came before the shape. Smoke, but not the smoke of a fresh fire. Smoke that had shared air with cold nights and broken roofs, its tail caught in torn wood and dust. The path curved and stopped at an open place where grass had grown in a rough rectangle. At the far edge a cabin sank into itself like an old animal lying down for the last time. Its roof had sagged. One shutter hung on a single rusted hinge. A door stood closed though light blew through the cracks all around it. To Hunter it was shelter. Shelter did not need to be clean. Shelter did not need to be safe. It only needed to be a barrier between a small life and the teeth of the world. He set the infant down for a moment and pressed against the door with his shoulder. The wood complained, dry and tired, and then gave an inch. Dust lifted in a soft breath. He pushed again. The latch splintered. The door scraped across the floor and stuck. Inside, stale air waited, old and cool. A beam of thin sun cut across the room and lit the slow dance of dust motes. The place was empty of living things. Hunter stood until the smell of wolves in his mind grew small enough to ignore. Then he returned to the baby, took the blanket once more, and carried the bundle inside. He picked a corner where the floor rose and the drafts were a little less sharp and set the child down, nose still buried in the cloth. The infant shifted. Hands like folded petals found the edge of the blanket and held it. Hunter lowered his chest to the floor around the tiny form, drawing heat into the circle of his body. He rested his head on his paws. He did not sleep. The house spoke in old wood, in the lazy tick of something settling deeper, in the occasional hush of a mouse exploring a nail hole. Outside, the light brightened and slid. Hunter held the day off with the sheer force of his attention. When the infant sighed, he nudged. When the blanket loosened, he tucked. When wind found a seam and the child shivered, he curved closer, the big cage of his ribs making a wall. Sometime after the sun began to move toward the far trees, the silence changed. The change was not sound but the shape of sound. The birds quieted as if a hand had cupped the forest. Hunter lifted his head and tasted the air. Nothing at first. Then the old sting of musk again, fresh now and threaded with damp fur and hunger. The cabin's thin walls vibrated with a step that landed weight on toes before heel. He stood. The first eyes showed in the gap below the eave. Then a second pair. Then another just beyond the window slat where the glass had long since fallen and shattered. Hunter put himself between the child and the door. His breath deepened. The hair along his spine lifted. He did not roar because roaring throws strength into the air. He kept his strength with him and let the rumble ride low. Scrapes at the threshold. A sniffing. A pause like a held inhale. Then the door jostled and did not open. The wolf that tried it shifted to the window and pushed its muzzle into the gap. Hunter lunged with a force that cracked dry wood and snapped his teeth onto air just as the muzzle withdrew. He landed and held his ground as the pack rearranged itself outside. This was patience they would test. They had numbers and hunger. He had learned that numbers look like a wall until you teach them doubt. The lead wolf stepped into the doorway. Its coat was dark, winter thin at the hips and shoulders and full only along the spine. Its eyes were steady and ready. Hunter placed his left paw forward and lowered his head, making his body longer and the baby smaller behind him. The wolf moved with care, unhurried, the split of its attention flicking between Hunter and the blanket shape beyond. As it crossed the plank where the light cut the floor in half, Hunter burst. The cabin filled with force. Claw on wood. Teeth meeting teeth in a sound that was half thunder, half steel. The wolf twisted and Hunter used the twist to drive it sideways into the doorframe. They snapped and slammed and broke slivers from the door with their weight. The lead wolf landed a bite that scored a shallow line along Hunter's shoulder. Pain sharpened his focus into a single point of necessary action. He hit the snout, not the throat, a blow that rang through bone, then the shoulder, then the chest, pressing, until the wolf lost the angle and sprang back out into the yard with a yelp that shook the rest into hesitation. A second wolf tried the window and Hunter was already turning, the heavy curve of his body throwing him close, his paw lashing, claws scoring the muzzle. The animal tumbled backward, slid, and found its feet with a snarl that did not quite hide its surprise. They waited then. They gathered themselves and moved as a tide does, first in, then out, then in again. The lead lowered its head, as if to remind the others that hunger and courage are separate matters. Hunter shifted his stance to account for the ache now running from his shoulder through his chest. He did not give ground. He would not give ground. The baby made a sound like a breath caught on a thread. Hunter's ear turned, just the ear, the rest of him carved from refusal. The lead saw the flick and took its chance. It sprang, landing with both forepaws on the threshold, pushing on the scrape of old boards. Hunter met it not with teeth, but with a bodily weight the wolf had not accounted for. The mastiff slammed the door wider with his shoulder, and rode the lead back out into the small yard. For an instant the infant lay in the open doorway beyond his flank. For an instant the rest of the pack saw a shape they could move toward. Hunter dropped his weight, pivoted on the bad leg through pain bright as iron, and planted himself in the gap. He became the door. A second wolf snapped for his hindquarter. He reversed with a blur that pulled a noise from his throat he had not made since the first battles of his youth. His teeth found fur, then skin, then a hold that shook the other animal loose. It scrambled sideways and left dots of red that smelled like a warning. The pack broke then. Not in retreat, not yet. They broke into smaller ideas of the fight, testing from angles, slipping to shadow when strength met them face on. Hunter held the center. The world narrowed to the rectangle of the doorway, to the strip of floor where light fell, to the point his back paw touched that kept him between danger and the child. Minutes stretched, then folded into one another. The wolves could not find a clean line. Hunter would not allow it. When they realized he was not going to fail on his own, they retreated to the yard and began to circle. Their eyes turned from Hunter to the cabin itself. The pack knew what could be broken. They found the wall where the boards were gray and thin and began to work. Teeth worried the seams. Claws drew crooked lines in dry grain. The wall muttered under the sudden attention. A slat moved. Another cracked along a knotted scar. Hunter spun, measured, and slammed his shoulder into the place to make the boards speak more loudly of their resistance. The wolves backed off and came again. The baby stirred. The blanket edged loose. For a heartbeat Hunter stood between two losses. He made his choice. He turned, tucked the cloth around the tiny chest, nudged the chin so the child's mouth opened and closed with a small soft click, then returned to the weak spot in the wall and placed his whole weight there, head low, paws spread, a growl drawn out of him like a line carved in stone. The pack paused in that odd way wild things pause, a shared thought passing like a shadow hand to hand. They stepped back as one and sank into the grass. They would wait. Hunger teaches patience to those who live long enough to learn it. Hunter did not move. Stillness became a test he could pass. The forest slowly exhaled. A jay scolded from a high limb. The sun slid down a little more. Light turned thin and slanted. He counted the breaths of the child and matched them. He listened for the small rattle of nothing in the roof that meant the night was coming to collect. The first scent of it brought him upright again. Not wolf. Not boar. Not deer. A smell of smoke that had not hung in the air an hour ago. A shape of ash, but living ash, ash with breath. He lifted his nose and sifted it apart. Wood first. Then something else. Metal that had been heated in other fires. Oil worked into leather. A note of something human, not the old ghost of whoever had built this place, but present and close, bending branches and stepping in caution. Hunter pushed a low warning into the room, and the baby made a drowsy sound in reply. He set his feet and let silence make the visitor declare itself. The figure did not come to the door. It moved slow and careful along the cabin's front like an animal reading a trap. Hunter heard the shift of weight, the brush of a coat against weathered plank, the brief scrape of a boot at a sunk nailhead. The wolves had risen as well and slipped away without argument. Hunter could not see them go. He smelled the decision and knew it had been made in a ledger older than this morning. He held still while the new scent reached the window, paused, and then worked around to the far corner where weeds had grown up against a pile of stones. When the step finally reached the doorway, it did not push. It waited for the door to remember how to open and swing itself inward another inch. Daylight ran across the edge of a hand first, a hand lined like an old map and darkened by sun. Then a shoulder showed and a face that had been outdoors a long time. The man's eyes were slow, not dull, slow like water that makes time to move around rocks. He stood with his body turned a little so that he could move in any direction at once. He did not lift his hands. He did not speak at once. He looked at Hunter and then lowered his gaze to the blanket and the tiny hand that had crept free. Something passed through his face, a softening that tightened again at the corners. He drew in a breath and let it go. Hunter did not back up. He let his body say what words would have said. The man could stay on the threshold. The space between them belonged to Hunter and to the child, and to whatever courage had curled up in the dust to sleep this afternoon. The man nodded just once at nothing and everything. When he spoke, his voice had the careful weight people use near skittish horses. "Easy, boy." Hunter did not flinch. He did not need the word. He watched the man listen to his own words and then adjust something inside himself so that the next thing he tried would fit better. "I am not here to take," the man said. "I saw wolves running this way and heard noise. I thought maybe something had found trouble." He let the sentence hang. He did not step forward. He did not glance at the blanket again, though the child was a gravity for every eye in the room. Outside, a breeze lifted dead leaves and pushed a lullaby through the gap. The man stood long enough that the air itself seemed to lean on him. Then he set something on the sill. A canteen. He slid it with 2 fingers so it went no farther than the line where sun stopped. "If there is thirst," he said. The words did not move Hunter. The water did. He could taste the clean metal from here. He could see in memory the way the baby's lips had reached for the stream. Hunter moved. Each step was a contract. He took the canteen by its strap and dragged it to the infant and laid it down. He nosed the cap, not understanding the screw to open. The man watched, saw the problem, and did not approach. He crouched just outside the door and spoke as if to himself. "Twist, that is all. I can show you and then step away." The wolves were gone. The man had left the rifle he carried leaning against a paling by the path. Hunter weighed all of it without knowing in words how he had done so. He reached across a small gap no one else could measure and lowered the canteen beside the threshold. The man slid a hand like a shadow, turned the cap slow, laid it down, and backed out of reach. Hunter pulled the canteen to the blanket and tipped, letting a little pool over his tongue to carry to the baby's mouth. The child stirred and did what it had done before, sought and drank and sighed. The man closed his eyes for a second as if something heavy and invisible had lifted from his shoulders. Hunter watched him open them again and look not at the dog this time but just beyond, into the room, measuring the weakness of walls, the freight of wind, the wide world of teeth outside. "You found a shell," he said softly. "Better than nothing. Not good enough for night." The light had thinned to a color that bleeds away quick when the sun is gone. Shadows had lengthened past the yard and were stepping through the doorway one by one. Far off, something called that was not threat yet but could become one. The man's eyes moved from the cracked boards to the door that did not latch, to the infant whose hand had gripped a fold of cloth the way a drowning person clutches a rope, and finally back to Hunter. "If you will have it, there is another place not far," he said. "4 walls that do not argue at every breeze. A fire laid earlier today. I can walk ahead and carry the little one. You can keep your watch as you wish." Hunter did not move. Trust is not a step but a series of smaller weight shifts a body makes without falling. He listened. He smelled the man's sweat and the silvery old smoke in his clothes and the honest metal of his gear, and he searched them for lies and found none his body would accept. The baby made a small sound that was both question and answer. Hunter lowered his head and touched the tiny knuckles with his nose. He lifted the blanket's corner again, set the canteen aside, and turned back to the door. Outside, the last bands of light pulled thin. The man remained where he had been, waiting for a permission Hunter did not know how to give except by walking. The mastiff crossed the boundary into the yard. The man stepped backward again to keep space between them and reached for the rifle only to sling it across his back with the muzzle down and the stock high, an old habit that tells even a nervous animal the tool is not ready. He bent at the threshold with both hands visible and slid his arms under the bundle. The baby eased against his chest and settled with a small nest of breath. The man looked quickly around the clearing and the trees beyond, and then began to move down the path he had come up, slow as someone carrying a bowl filled to its lip. Hunter followed so close his whiskers brushed the cloth of the man's coat. He placed each foot in a memory of the man's last footfall. He glanced left and right and back, reading the pale windows between trunks for anything that moved wrong. The forest closed behind them as the first stars lit pale and the moon lifted like a coin caught on the edge of the world. Somewhere, though, beneath the leaf smell and the thin scent of frost, another presence had woken to the sound of steps on old paths. A branch eased back into place after something had passed. A stone slid where weight had been. The trail ahead bent toward a line of darker trees. The man's breath soughed soft and steady. The child slept. Hunter's ears tilted toward the darkness on their right. Something was moving there, silent and steady, keeping their pace. The forest was a cathedral of silence broken only by the shuffle of boots on earth and the measured thud of heavy paws. The man carried the child close to his chest, his arms cradling the fragile body as if it were the most delicate glass. Hunter kept to his side, pressed so near that his shoulder brushed the man's coat with each stride. Every few steps he paused, head low, amber eyes cutting into the gloom, ears pricked for the sound that had been shadowing them since they left the ruined cabin. The trail bent through a thicket of black pines. Their branches knitted together above, trapping the moonlight so that the path became a tunnel of darkness. The man shifted the baby in his arms and adjusted the strap of the rifle on his back. His breath came calm, controlled, though his eyes darted from shadow to shadow. He did not speak. Words would have been swallowed by the hush, and both man and dog knew silence was safer. Hunter slowed, nostrils flaring. The musk of wolves lingered faintly but farther now, like an echo receding through the trees. What stalked them was not the pack. This scent was sharper, tinged with iron and smoke. Human. More than one. Hunter's growl rolled low in his chest, a warning more for the stranger at his side than for whatever prowled the undergrowth. The man stopped and crouched slightly, clutching the baby tighter. His eyes flicked to Hunter, reading the stiffened posture, the raised hackles. He set his jaw, whispering just loud enough to carry. "I smell it too." From the thicket came the sound of a twig snapping. Then another. Not careless, but deliberate. Hunter's body coiled, his muscles a taut spring ready to launch. The man shifted his weight, his free hand sliding to the handle of the heavy wrench tied to his belt. His rifle remained slung, too slow to unsling with a child in his arms. He would have to fight up close. The brush stirred. A figure stepped out, half hidden by the folds of a ragged coat, hood drawn low over his brow. His face was rough, his eyes glinting in the pale light. He smiled, though there was no kindness in it. "Well, well," the man said, his voice smooth with mockery. "What do we have here? A dog and a child, and someone foolish enough to think they can guard both." Two more shadows emerged behind him, blades glinting in their hands. They spread out, forming a crooked arc across the trail. The hooded man's grin widened as he gestured lazily toward the baby. "Hand it over. That bundle will fetch more than you can imagine." Hunter's growl deepened until it rumbled like distant thunder. His teeth bared, eyes locked on the intruders. The man holding the child did not flinch. His stance lowered, his grip on the wrench firm. "You'll get nothing," he said flatly. The standoff stretched thin. The intruders shifted, their movements slow, testing. Hunter felt the tension coil tighter, every instinct telling him the strike was seconds away. The hooded man's grin vanished. His voice sharpened. The first attacker lunged, knife raised. Before the man could move, Hunter was already there, a streak of muscle and fury. His jaws clamped onto the assailant's arm with bone-crushing force. The man screamed, dropping his knife as Hunter shook him violently before hurling him to the dirt. Blood sprayed dark against the pale leaves. The second attacker rushed from the side. The man holding the baby pivoted, using his free arm to swing the wrench. The heavy steel connected with a sickening crack, sending the intruder sprawling into the brush with a cry of pain. The forest lay in uneasy silence as the last remnants of daylight bled through the dense canopy above. Shadows stretched long and thin, crawling over the forest floor like restless spirits. Each rustle of leaves, each faint chirp of some distant bird, felt heavy and dampened, swallowed by the vast wilderness. It was not the peaceful silence of nature, but one that carried unease, a warning carved into the air. Through the underbrush limped a creature who had once been strong, proud, and feared. His name was Hunter, though no human tongue had called him that in years. He was a mastiff of formidable size, scarred from countless battles, with amber eyes that still glowed fiercely beneath the grime of hardship. Yet now, those same eyes were hollowed by hunger. His ribs jutted sharply against his ragged skin, his once muscular frame stripped down to bone and sinew by weeks without food. His steps were slow, his gait uneven, but his spirit had not yet surrendered. Every nerve in his body had sharpened into raw instinct. Hunger ruled him, driving his senses to feverish precision. His ears flicked at the faintest sound. His nostrils flared at every shift in the air. His jaws clenched at the memory of prey he could not catch. The forest had turned cruel, offering him only fleeting hope. A rabbit darting into impossible burrows, a deer too swift, a bird too high. Survival had become torment, and torment had become his only companion. Still, he pressed on, each labored step a gamble against collapse. His paws sank into damp soil, crunching over brittle leaves. The copper tang of blood still clung faintly to his memory, reminding him of past fights, of nights spent snarling into the dark against predators as desperate as he was. His mind, raw and weary, yearned for nothing more than sustenance. Then, something unusual stirred the air. A scent, faint at first, cutting through the heavy perfume of moss, damp bark, and earth. It was not prey. It was not predator. It was something different. Hunter halted mid-step, lowering his head, his chest rumbling softly. His nostrils flared wide, drawing in the aroma. It was fragile, delicate, and yet alive. His ears twitched as he followed the whisper of sound that accompanied it, barely distinguishable from the breath of wind through branches. But it was not the wind. It was a cry. Thin, high-pitched, and trembling with helplessness. The kind of sound that prickled even the most ancient fibers of instinct. Hunter's ears stood erect. His tail stiffened. He moved forward cautiously, each step measured, his great body sliding low against the earth. His amber eyes darted through the undergrowth as the sound grew louder, more distinct. He knew cries. He had heard prey animals wail under the grip of predators, their pleas lost to indifference. Yet this was not the cry of prey. It carried a vulnerability that struck something deeper within him. He pushed through the last curtain of bushes and entered a clearing where an ancient oak tree towered above all else. Its roots twisted out from the soil like the gnarled fingers of a giant, creating hollow pockets among the earth. And there, nestled awkwardly in the crook of those roots, was the source of the sound. A baby. Hunter froze. The child lay wrapped in a tattered blanket, stained with dirt, clinging weakly to fragile warmth. Tiny fists flailed helplessly, a soft wail spilling into the dusk. The sight rooted Hunter to the ground as conflicting instincts erupted within him. Hunger clawed at his belly, demanding he turn away, that he not waste precious strength on such fragility. Yet another current, deeper and far older than hunger, ran through him like fire in his blood. Something primal, something buried yet undeniable. His great head tilted. His amber eyes flickered with uncertainty. The child's cries softened, faltering as though it had sensed the beast's towering presence. Hunter inched forward, paws crunching gently over the leaves. His breath came hot and uneven as he lowered his muzzle, sniffing the air that clung to the infant. It was a strange scent, unlike prey or predator. Earth and cloth mingled with a sweetness, an innocence that unsettled him. For a long moment, Nothing moved but the rising and falling chest of the baby and the twitch of Hunter's ears. His hunger gnawed at him mercilessly, whispering that he was wasting time, that weakness would consume him if he did not turn away. Yet another voice, wordless but insistent, pulled him closer. And then, against all reason, Hunter lowered himself to the ground. His massive frame curled protectively around the infant, his scarred body forming a living barrier against the creeping chill of night. The warmth of the child's frail body against his own sparked something he had not felt in years: purpose. He let out a low, almost tender whine, his hunger forgotten for the moment. The forest grew darker. Winds shifted cold and sharp, carrying distant echoes of howls that rippled through the trees. Predators stirred in the shadows, their voices weaving through the night like promises of doom. Hunter's amber eyes remained fixed, scanning the treeline, his body coiled like a spring. He did not rest, though fatigue pulled at his limbs. His ears twitched at every rustle, every shift of the breeze. The baby stirred softly, letting out a fragile sound, and Hunter instinctively nudged the blanket closer around its tiny frame. His movements were clumsy, yet guided by instinct so ancient it needed no thought. He had become the guardian of something smaller, weaker, yet infinitely more precious than himself. But the forest did not forgive weakness. Somewhere beyond the clearing, a rustle grew louder, deliberate, not of wind but of something alive. Hunter's ears twitched. His hackles rose. A faint glimmer appeared among the trees, eyes glowing yellow gliding through the dark. Then another set, and another. A wolf stepped into view, sleek and gaunt, its lips peeling back in a low, guttural snarl. Then the rest of the pack followed, shadows slinking between the trees, circling like predators born of the night itself. Their eyes fixed not on Hunter, but on the bundle at his side. The baby whimpered, and Hunter's body tensed into stone. His lips curled back, exposing teeth as sharp as broken glass, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. He stood, his massive frame towering over the fragile child. His hunger, his fatigue, his pain, all were forgotten. Instinct had chosen his purpose. The first wolf crept forward, its body low, muscles taut. It lunged, teeth bared, a flash of silver in the moonlight. Hunter met it head-on. The clearing erupted with sound, snarls, yelps, and the crash of bodies colliding. Blood spattered the earth as teeth clashed and claws raked. Hunter fought with a fury that shook the trees, his every strike fueled not by survival alone but by something greater: protection. One wolf yelped, retreating with a wounded shoulder. Another darted in, but Hunter's massive paw struck it down, sending it sprawling into the underbrush. Yet they came again, circling, relentless. Hunter's body grew slick with blood, his breaths ragged, his legs trembling. But his stance did not waver. Behind him, the baby stirred, untouched, its tiny chest rising and falling with fragile breath. The wolves hesitated, testing, circling. Then, one by one, they withdrew, melting into the forest, their glowing eyes fading like extinguished embers. Hunter stood panting, blood dripping from his scars, his body quivering with exhaustion.